And I'd like to welcome you all to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. Our tradition draws from the wisdom of the world's religions, from the guidance of reason, and from direct experiences of mystery and wonder. And this morning I thought it would be fun to read the welcome from the Coventry Cathedral in England, because it seems to be a lot of the same things that we welcome here. We extend a special welcome to those who are single, married, divorced, widowed, gay, confused, filthy rich, comfortable, or dirt poor. We extend a special welcome to wailing babies and excitable toddlers. We welcome you whether you can sing like Pavarotti or just growl quietly to yourself. You're welcome here if you are just browsing, just woken up, or just gotten out of prison. We don't care if you're more Christian than the Archbishop of Canterbury or haven't been to church since Christmas 10 years ago. The message continues. We extend a warm welcome to those who are over 60 but not grown up yet, and to teenagers who are growing up too fast. We welcome keep fit mums, football dads, starving artists, tree huggers, latte sippers, vegetarians, junk food eaters. We welcome those who are in recovery and those who are still addicted. We welcome you if you're having problems, are down in the dumps, or don't like organized religion. We offer a welcome to those who think the earth is flat, who work too hard, who don't work, can't spell, or are here because Granny is visiting and wanted to come to Cathedral. We welcome those who are inked, pierced, both, or neither. We offer special welcome to those who could use a prayer right now, had religion shoved down their throat as kids, or got lost in city center and wound up here by mistake. We welcome pilgrims, tourists, seekers, doubters, and you. So, whoever you are, wherever you come from, whomever you love, we are glad you are here today. And as always, please feel free to move to the social hall after service for coffee and conversation. And this is the time for announcements. So if anyone has an announcement, please come on up, use this mic, and tell us what you are announcing. Thanks.
And now I invite you to take a deep breath, settle more firmly into your body, and listen to the sound of the chime. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations, inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity, indeed to the altar of all creation. We like this flame to remind ourselves once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Now, does everybody have a hymnal? We will sing hymn 360, Here We Have Gathered. responsive reading, number 662 in the back of the hymnal. The years of all of us are short, our lives precarious.
Our days and nights go hurrying on, and there is scarcely time to do the little that we might.
Yet we find time for bitterness, for petty treason and evasion.
What can we do to stretch our hearts out?
Here we are, all of us, all upon this planet, bound together in a common destiny.
In our lives, stay light in the dark.
Kindred in this, each lighted by the same precarious, flickering flame of life. How does it happen that we are not kindred in all things else?
Can't hear him. Oh, yeah.
So in this time when we have just now come back together again, we get to spend time actually seeing each other and looking at one another's faces without a video screen in between. We have joys and we have sorrows that we would like to share with one another. If anyone has a joy that they are bursting out with, or a concern that's weighing heavy on their hearts, please come on up to the front. Use the microphone to say a few words if you choose.
Following some words following some words, in a time of silence, we will sing together hymn 83, Winds Be Still. In his book, Awakening the Soul, a book of daily devotions, UU minister John Morgan quotes a bumper sticker. The most radical thing we can do is to introduce people to one another. Let us ponder the possibilities. We can introduce to each other the shy 10-year-olds, the women abandoned by their husbands, the survivors sharing a common grief, the transgender and the cisgender, the Palestinian and the Israelite, the Presbyterian and the evangelical, the Pakistani and the Indian, the Trumpist and the anti-Trumpist, the Muslim and the Christian. We can look into each other's eyes and feel our common humanity. We can look deep into each other's eyes and understand that we are all in this together. Let us pause now in silent awareness of the possibilities. Amen. This reading is from Marilyn Sewell, The Inherent Worth and Dignity of Every Person. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The first principle is our foundation. It speaks of respecting others enough to never objectify and control them in the service of ideology, however precious. It encourages people to unfold according to their true and authentic nature, to live with integrity according to their own heart's leaning. As Unitarian Universalists, we accept people as they are, whether they are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender, whether they are Democrats or Republicans, whether they are white or black or something else. All have worth and dignity. All are welcome at the table. The first principle is human-centered. It implies that living on this earth is the proper focus of our time and attention. Heaven will take care of itself. Our world at a time, as Thoreau said. One world at a time, as Thoreau said. Furthermore, our first principle strongly implies that we are called to create justice, where justice does not now exist. If all people do have worth and dignity, can we allow some of them to live with no hope? Allow some to go hungry and without shelter? Can we turn our eyes away from discrimination? Although the roots of Unitarian Universalism are Judeo-Christian, our insistence on the primacy of conscience has drawn adherents of diverse religious backgrounds, beliefs, and attitudes, including agnostics and atheists. Believing that all people have spiritual needs, we invite whoever would come, asking only that people give the same respect and tolerance to others that they would want for themselves. We are a free religious faith. Because of this radical respect for others and their choices, Unitarian Universalists are able to act as advocates for certain oppressed groups when other denominations would find such action politically impossible. What is the theological grounding of our first principle? Because we believe that our God is one God, one and the same spirit of love uniting all people, then all are brothers and sisters. When we reject individuals because we disagree with their perspective on religion or politics, we are violating our first principle. We need not think alike to love alike, wrote Francis David, an early martyr. Our tradition pledges us to be deeply respectful of others, even when we cannot accept their values or theological perspectives. We are called upon to reject the easy answers and to struggle with the values and conflicts inherent in human life. We must study and reflect and think and write and get beneath the surface of things, or else we will become facile in regard to these significant moral and ethical issues. As liberal religious people, the fruits of the Spirit must be made manifest in our commitment to justice. We believe in the inherent worth and dignity of all persons. Imperfect as we are, this principle calls us into right relationship with others. It calls us for profound respect, even when we differ with the views and behavior of others. It calls for gentleness and forgiveness and the understanding that redemption is just a decision away. It calls us to leave the safety and sameness of our suburbs and stand against hunger and hopelessness in our urban streets. Our first principle remains a touchstone out of our remarkable tradition, a covenant of relationship that supports the other principles and orients us remarkably quickly when we lose our way. In our first principle, we agree to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. What could this possibly mean? Is there any reason to accept it? Here's a little story I saw in the newspaper a few years back. It's from the New York Times Metropolitan Diary column. After church one recent weekend, 4 of us stopped for lunch at a neighborhood restaurant. It was busy and bustling, but the staff knows us. We found a good table right in the middle. As we were enjoying ourselves, the friend on my right and I noticed a man who had taken great care to make his tattered clothes look spiffy. He had finished his meal and was searching one pocket after another for enough dollar bills to pay for his lunch. He was becoming increasingly frantic as he seemed to realize that he did not have enough money to cover the check. My friend got up quietly as if going to the restroom, and in passing the man's table, leaned down, pretending to find a $10 bill on the floor. It was done so naturally that when my friend offered the bill to the distracted man, the man's whole body language changed. He said, thank you. I was sure I had that bill." He was beaming. My friend smiled warmly and walked away. I've been thinking of this ever since. My friend did a great kindness, not because of the $10 gift, but because the man was treated with gentleness, caring, and respect, and not given charity. The friend treated the man in tattered but spiffy clothes, he treated him as a person of worth and dignity. We should follow that example. There are a lot of directions we could go with this inherent worth and dignity idea, a lot of directions from which we could look at this. But today I'll start with January 6th and July 27th. We had an insurrection on January 6th and a congressional hearing about that insurrection on July 27th. I won't try to describe what happened on January 6th. You're probably as familiar with the events of that day as I am. But here's my question. Were those who participated in the attack on the Capitol or who inspired or encouraged others to participate in that attack, were they persons of worth and dignity? No, I don't think so. They might have been persons of worth and dignity in the past, and we can hope that they will be such persons in the future. And perhaps we or they can be comforted by the idea that God loves them, no matter what. For me, they are beyond the pale. If I believed in the idea of a literal life after death, with heaven and hell as possible destinations for our immortal souls, I would be tempted to say that the January 6th insurrectionists should be sent to one of the lower rungs of hell, not as deep as Hitler, but pretty far down. The first principle, the worth and dignity principle, looks different from the others. 2 through 7 are essentially ethical statements, while number 1, while it certainly has an ethical element, would appear to be an empirical, a factual statement. Every person, every human being has worth and dignity. They're built in. We're born with them. I've not done any research on this, but it appears to me that the principle is based on 4 ideas. First, in the account of creation in the first chapter of Genesis, we're told that humanity was created in the image of God. A little later in Genesis, Adam and Eve disobey God by eating the forbidden fruit. That's the origin of the original sin idea. Unitarians denied original sin, making atonement through the sacrifice of God's Son unnecessary, and providing the basis for a positive view of humanity, inherent worth and dignity. Universalists focused on God as love, and a loving God would save everyone. And then primarily in the 20th century, humanists focused on humanity, setting God aside. Now let's look at this from a slightly different angle. Our fourth principle states that we favor a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Let's set aside the meaning half of that. Don't think you find meaning by searching for it. We want to find the truth. We're in favor of science, of learning generally, of education. Thus, I feel the duty to ask, is it true that every person has worth and dignity? You could also ask what makes the search for truth free or what makes it responsible. But let's save those questions for another day, or at least for coffee hour. Before we go further, let's stop here and ask, what do these 3 words, inherent, worth, and dignity, mean? I won't bore you with etymologies of the 3 words. When we think of worth, we usually, or at least often, think of monetary value. What is that house worth over there? What is the net worth of your uncle's store? When we think of dignity, we're likely to have in mind tasteful, somewhat formal clothes, well-coiffed hair, good table manners, knowing which fork to use, good grammar, knowing when to say lie and when to say lay, and so on. That's not what the first principle is about, is it? Here's the question. By our first principle, we affirm and promote humanity's inherent worth and dignity. That assumes or proclaims that all of us humans inherently have worth and dignity. Is that credible? And the answer we learned on January 6th, we didn't know it already, is no. Some people lack worth and dignity. Or perhaps we may be born with worth and dignity, but we can lose it or throw it away. Or in some of us it becomes so hidden that we appear to lack it. Or perhaps God can see our worth and dignity even when we cannot. Or perhaps some of us may not be born with worth and dignity, but we all have the potential to attain it, and most of us do. Or perhaps our principle means we should treat everyone as though they had worth and dignity, whether they have it or not. And our treating them this way will help them attain it. And we might wonder, if we have principles 2 through 7, does the first principle really add anything? We might conclude that the first principle is not an empirical statement, but an ethical statement. A commandment: act in such a way that you will be seen, correctly seen, to be a person of worth and dignity. But the preamble to the 7 principles says that we not only promote them, but also that we affirm them. That we affirm them for every person, apparently from birth to death, or maybe longer than that. That makes it somewhat awkward to say that someone was born with worth and dignity but lost it, or that someone has neither worth nor dignity now, but we hope and expect that they will have it eventually. If we have misgivings about worth and dignity principle, does that undercut our 4th principle, commitment to the use of the democratic process? I'll resist the temptation to spend the rest of the hour talking about democracy and its precarious state here in the US of A, and simply say that a system can still be called democratic even if not everyone is entitled to vote. As as long as the standards for determining the right to vote are morally acceptable and consistently applied. Thus, we usually don't permit 9-year-olds to vote, or non-citizens, or those who have already voted. Here's another idea. Forget about the worth and dignity principle and have instead the simple rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We shouldn't take the golden rule completely literally, but it provides a good starting point for morality. Let's turn now to the Declaration of Independence. This quotation will be familiar to you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, instead of men, we would probably say men and women, or people, but we cannot assume that those who signed this declaration were that inclusive. And men is understood to not just mean men, but white men. Can we claim, following the example of the Declaration of Independence, that our 7 principles are self-evident? Can we claim that the rights implicit in our principles are unalienable, having been endowed by our Creator? No, I don't think so. But we can claim, in my opinion, that the values implicit in our principles are good ones, and that the world would be a better place if everyone followed them. Indeed, our UU congregations and our UU association of congregations would be better if we UUs consistently lived by our principles. Can we assert that we Unitarian Universalists as individuals have agreed to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person? No, I don't think so. The preamble to the 7 principles states that it's the member congregations that enter this covenant. Can you call yourself a UU if you disagree with some or all of the 7 principles? Apparently you can. Can a congregation condition membership on one's agreeing with the 7 principles? I suppose it could. I haven't done any research to see what the actual practice is. Can you call yourself a UU if you are not a member of a UU congregation? I'll leave these questions for you to ponder. What sets us apart from explicitly and unequivocally Christian denominations are not our 7 principles, but doctrines about the divinity of Jesus Christ and how one's immortal soul achieves salvation. We avoid getting into that theological thicket by listing a number of sources for our living tradition, including Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. I remember back in my Presbyterian youth, many decades ago, in our weekly worship, the congregation would always recite the Apostles' Creed. I can still do it from memory, but don't worry, I won't. I wonder how many of those sitting in the pews with me back then actually believed all the statements they were assenting to, or how many of them thought about what those statements meant. There's a virgin birth. That seems unlikely. What about resurrection of the body? Who today sees that in the future? And here's my favorite. Jesus, after the resurrection and his brief time back with his friends, ends up sitting on the right hand of God. What can that possibly mean? And even if it's possible, many of us would object to this favoritism of right over left. Our 7 principles, although not self-explanatory, are more easily understood. How we should live them is not obvious, but they're a good starting point for our thinking. When we discuss worth and dignity, why should we restrict ourselves to humanity? How about elephants? How about the tall, majestic oak trees I see on my frequent hikes in Ridley Creek State Park? I'm not sure what the tops of them look like. The parts I can see without lying flat on my back or climbing a neighboring tree are amazing. Let's not forget music. If anything has worth and dignity, surely Beethoven's Ninth Symphony does. And you could probably give examples from art and literature, too. But extending the possibility of worth and dignity to corporations, going too far? And in the decades to come, will we decide that robots can have worth and dignity? Or will the robots decide that for themselves? Here's a story from a recent book review. I've never forgotten the baby seal I abandoned in an Austrian basement. Its warm button eyes followed as I walked away. Its stubby paws wriggled, and then I was halted by a despondent, lonely coo. Felt like a monster. I knew the seal was only a robot, an animatronic stuffed animal from Japan, designed 20 years earlier as a companion for residents of care homes. I was the seal's only friend. Finally, the eyes swiveled away, its coos barely audible, and I sheepishly escaped my paralysis. Yet the creature's unrequited calls for cuddles followed me for a long time after. And another question has occurred to me. Why do we single out worth and dignity? What about charity, compassion, curiosity, honesty, humility, loyalty? Are these less important? Are they less inherent? Let's go back to the story of the 5 people in the restaurant. The friend with the $10 bill treated the apparently indigenous, whatever, man as a person of worth and dignity. That shows that the donor was himself a person of worth and dignity. Really? What if he is opposed to increased public support for quality education for children of impoverished families? What if he has refused vaccination to protect himself and others from COVID? What if he is indifferent to the plight of Afghans who helped American forces during our 20-year war? How helpful is the inherent worth and dignity principle in dealing with important moral issues? Consider capital punishment. I'm against capital punishment. I can frame an argument against capital punishment on the foundation of the inherent worth and dignity principle. But, likewise, I could, if I were so inclined, use the inherent worth and dignity principle to add weight to an argument in favor of capital punishment. Think of the various serial killers that have afflicted us in recent years. Of course, they are entitled in court to the presumption of innocence. But in a particular situation, if the police had the right man, perhaps the only way to recognize his worth and dignity is to allow him dignity. To allow him dignity would be to execute him, or perhaps to allow him the opportunity to take his own life, rather than locking him up for the rest of his life. Then there are end-of-life issues. When someone is terminally ill, should we allow them to leave us through assisted suicide? Should we force them to remain alive by means of a feeding tube? Does the worth and dignity principle help us to decide? How about abortion? If worth and dignity are inherent, do we have them from birth or from some time before birth? And is the answer to that question relevant for determining whether abortion is morally acceptable? And what about babies who begin life in a test tube? Should we toss out the first of our principles? Should we discard the idea that everyone has inherent worth and dignity? It doesn't square with the facts. It doesn't answer the tough questions. Who needs it? Well, I think we do need it. If we could go back a few decades to when the 7 principles were first formulated, perhaps we might have done them differently, but we cannot go back. And to try to remove any of these principles now, especially the first one, at best be regarded as a tasteless joke. If adding the proposed 8th principle is controversial, deleting any one of the 7, especially number 1, would be controversial squared. Let's stick with it and continue to explore its inexhaustible possibilities. Amen. And now our closing hymn is number 298, Wake Now My Senses. Let's just do 3 verses of this, 1 through 3. extinguish this flame, but not the gift of wisdom, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and in our hands until we are together again. We are here to abet creation and to witness to it, to notice each other's beautiful face and complex nature, so that creation need not play to an empty house, and so that all who have the opportunity to